And manufacturing initiatives at the American Apparel and Footwear Association. So for those of you who aren't familiar with AAFA, we're a national trade association based in Washington, D.C. So we represent, as the name suggests, apparel and footwear companies, and our public policy and advocacy focuses around three core pillars: brand protection, which I oversee that portfolio, supply chain and manufacturing, and trade. So just to give you a quick overview of our members, obviously this list is not exhaustive, but just to give you an idea, obviously I'm sure many of you on the line are very familiar with our member companies and/or wear their products on a daily basis. So I'm here to talk a little bit more about our work on fraudulent advertising. About 2 years ago, our members started coming to us that they were encountering fraudulent ads across social media platforms like Facebook and Instagram. So we decided to dive a bit deeper and do some research into what they were experiencing. And we decided to partner with another organization whose membership focuses on apparel and footwear companies, but is also much broader than that industry sector. So that's the Transnational Alliance to Combat Illicit Trade. So we grouped together with TraceIt to look into the issue of fraudulent advertising online. And we were very excited. In July of 2020, we published a report on the topic. And so you'll see on screen just some highlights from that report, but we really took a deep dive, and through our own membership as well as TraceIt's membership, we looked at international brands that were targeted by fraudulent ads, mostly on Facebook and Instagram. And again, this dates back a bit more to 2017. But what was really fascinating is that we saw that some of these ads, and what our member companies were reporting to us, is that these ads had millions of views and obviously were going undetected on social media platforms like Instagram and Facebook for quite some time. So obviously, I think a lot of this has been covered, but what are the dangers when it comes to fraudulent advertisements? There are huge risks to consumers who shop online and they don't know any better. They see these ads pop up on their social media feeds, and they think that these ads must be in some way, shape, or form affiliated with the legitimate brand. Then obviously they click through to a third-party website that's counterfeit or fraudulent in nature. They purchase an item, either that item never shows up to their doorstep, or if it does, it's of inferior quality. And we included some really great examples from consumers, as well as brands who got those examples from consumers, where we had consumers actually reaching out to customer service departments of our member companies saying that they saw an ad online, they thought it was put out by that brand, they purchased it thinking that, and then they were disappointed when the item showed up and obviously was not of great quality. And so then it becomes an issue where the brand has to educate the consumer that that ad was not put out by them, despite how legitimate it may have looked. So there are consumer risks at play when we're looking at the world of online fraudulent advertising. Obviously, as we all know, there is a risk to businesses and brand owners. Their intellectual property is harmed, and obviously looking at the economic growth and the harm to innovation. There are also data privacy concerns. When we look at a lot of these websites, they have a complete disregard for privacy. And so a lot of consumers end up having their personal details and credit card information stolen as a result of clicking through to these ads. And then what our members started to do as they were monitoring and conducting their enforcement on these social media platforms, became very apparent that a lot of these ads were being put out by the same criminal advertisers. So again, it really bolstered the fact that a lot of these ads are being put out by organized criminal rings. So I think that's important when we are looking at the dangers associated with fraudulent advertising. But what are the causes? As we all know, there is very limited verification for advertisers. So when we look at some of these social media platforms, all you need to do is provide your name, email address, and a credit card number. And within a couple of hours, you're able to put out hundreds, if you'd like, advertisements across these social media platforms. So there's really limited verification when we're looking at this ecosystem. And that's something I'll talk a little bit more when I touch on our recommendations. There are systematic weaknesses across these platforms that enable criminals and counterfeiters to take advantage of the circumstances. And then there are really, there's limited protection when we're looking at the number of advertisers that even if their advertisements are pulled down from certain social media platforms like Instagram and Facebook, they're easily able to set up new accounts and get those advertisements right back onto the platform. So when we look at the advertising supply chain online, there are a lot of weaknesses that we think need to be strengthened. And obviously this report was a way to call out those weaknesses, but also use it as hopefully a springboard to effectuate change, especially when we're looking at the advocacy and public policy world. But just to give you all some examples when we're looking at the apparel and footwear space, again, these are advertisements that we are now including. We're working on a second version of our fraudulent advertising report, which we're very excited about. So these are some new advertisements that we're including in the next iteration of our report. But again, you'll see from these ads, there are some telltale signs that these ads may be questionable in nature. Again, when we're seeing things like sale off 50%, order now. And again, these sponsored posts may look legitimate to some consumers who, again, think that the brands are actually putting out these advertisements across social media. So most of the examples that we included in the first iteration of our report, and then obviously a lot of the examples which we will include in the next version of our report, heavily focused on Instagram and Facebook, but that's a result of member companies coming to us, and that's where they're focusing a lot of their enforcement efforts on. And obviously where they're seeing a large number of these fraudulent ads popping up. But interestingly, what we are hearing from some member companies now is that they're starting to encounter fraudulent advertisements on TikTok. So that's something, it's another platform that they're going to continue to monitor as well. And then just some other examples of advertisements. The image on the left was actually a video that I came across on Instagram. And I think it goes to show you again how these criminal advertisers are taking advantage and using various mediums. So this video just showcased an entire warehouse full of counterfeit products. And as you see from the still image on screen, there were just countless brands that were included and counterfeit versions of their products. So these should be red flag indicators. Again, when you're seeing language, please contact me at the bottom of the homepage for more styles. And this is a sponsored post where this should be raising alarm bells internally, but as we know, and something I will touch on in just a minute, there is really no proactive work to see and kind of monitor what's going up on these platforms. So there's really no due diligence happening at the front end. Everything is mostly reactive when it comes to monitoring and enforcing on these advertisements across social media. And then the two other images on screen, I thought it was interesting to point out that a lot of what we're hearing from member companies, as well as through our own research, we're finding ads that are popping up on social media platforms like Instagram. And then when you go to find out more about the advertiser and you go to the ad library on Facebook and or Instagram, you'll see no results, even though a sponsored ad was just in your feed. And so obviously this issue of dynamic ads and actually trying to quantify, again, we see that these advertisers are putting out these advertisements, then trying to get any transparency on the ads that they've taken out or the other ads that they are currently running on the platform, it becomes very difficult. So just to wrap things up, our recommendations in the first version of the report, I think this touches on a lot of the conversation and a lot of what the previous speakers have mentioned. But I think that when we look at this whole advertising ecosystem online, it's pretty apparent there needs to be an overhaul, or at the very least, we need to start strengthening some of these protocols, just because advertisers are able to take advantage of these circumstances globally. And again, there should be no reason, especially when we're looking into these advertisements where you have advertisers that are located in one region of the world, for example, in Africa or in South America, and they're targeting a very specific set of consumers, whether that's in the United States or in Europe, and they're targeting a very specific age demographic. These are things that I think platforms have a responsibility to do a rigorous review of advertisements prior to their publication on their sites, which is a recommendation you see on the screen too. Obviously, having better know your business protocols is also important, because we not only need to know who we're conducting business with and who's operating on these platforms, but I think a large part of this is also for consumers to have that visibility, to know that they're actually not purchasing a product from a brand when they may think that that's actually the case. And then looking at the reactive measures against fraudulent advertisers, we think that there needs to be better systems in place to actually take action and measures against these repeat fraudulent advertisers, because that does not seem to be the case at the moment. And then a lot of what our conversation today has focused on ensuring that consumers and brands and rights holders can share this information, not only with the platforms, but with each other. So I think that that information sharing component is really, really important when we're looking at this. And then the fifth recommendation that we included, we suggested that there should be an e-business license for advertisers, again, a stronger measure, so that it's not just the case that you can use, or that you can take out an advertisement with something as simple as a name, email address, and credit card. But we've used our recommendations and this report to really interact and engage with government agencies, not just in the United States, but also abroad. So we were very pleased. The UK IPO office actually just included our report in one of their own reports that just came out. We've engaged with the US Trade Representative, who is also focusing on this issue as well. So we really encourage not only brand owners and trademark owners in this space to raise the alarm and raise the red flags when it comes to fraudulent advertising, but think about how can this be how can we use this information and focus and spotlight this issue to effectuate change. And right now there's a lot of conversation taking place in Washington, D.C. on e-commerce legislation. So it's not focused specifically on online advertising, but again, we're having these conversations on visibility, transparency, accountability when we're looking at these big tech platforms, and obviously the reach that social media platforms have. So this feeds into the conversation, and we're very hopeful that with the second iteration of this report, again, just hearing from our member companies, and the member companies have traced it as well, that this is very much an issue that they're still focusing on, and also being cognizant that as we're coming into the holiday shopping season, we'll probably see an influx of fraudulent ads across social media. So something for us all to be aware of. I don't know how I'm doing on timing, but that wraps up my presentation if there are any questions. And thank you for having me today.
Thank you very much, Christina. We've unfortunately run out of time.
Okay.
But in the chat, you have a lot of fans. If you wouldn't mind, and please take your time to read through the chat and correspond with a few of the people who I think agree with you. Thank you very much for giving this presentation. And please, when the second report is finished, please share the link with me so that I can send it to all the participants as well.
Will do. Thank you for having me.